Have you ever had the feeling like you'd been lied to about something? Something big? I have personally had that feeling since I was very young, so I went searching for the truth. And though there is always a bigger picture, I am going to present some specifics, because we need to identify the bars before we have any hope of escaping the prison. Let's start with a question. Out of all the deadliest sins, what do you think is the deadliest? Think for a moment. My experience has led to the answer of greed. Let me explain why by asking a few questions. How many wars throughout history have been fought over wanting more power, more riches, or more land?
Too much greed, limitless sort of desire. Also source of problem, source of suffering, individual also. If you always keep the feeling one more, until the last day, that person never satisfied.
Why are we letting large corporations dictate to us who we are and how we should live?
The rich are getting richer. That ain't gonna change and that ain't gonna stop.
The top 1% of the world's population own 80% of the world's wealth. It's incredible that people put up with it, but they're poor, they're demoralized, they're frightened, and therefore they think perhaps the safest thing to do is take orders and hope for the best.
How is the abundance of this planet being hoarded by a small group of people, while the masses toil day after day trying to stay afloat? Well, here's a hint. It was not Hitler that killed all those innocent people in World War II. It was everyday people like you and me convinced, over time, that it was the right thing to do, or that they had no choice but to take orders.
In the early 60s, Stanley Milgram tried to figure out what characteristics there were of evil people. Was there an evil strain, or could normal people do really bad things? And so he set up this experiment. In the experiment, he had an actor playing an experimental subject and a real experimental subject.
You want to step right in here, learner, and have a seat there?
They went into this room, and he had an experimenter say, we're going to see if mild electric shocks will help people memorize lists.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 75 volts. Oh. Soft hair. He kind of did some yelling in there.
And the shocks increased with the number of mistakes that they made.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man in there.
The subject, the real subject, is begging the scientist-looking person to stop too, and the scientist only says, the experiment requires that you continue.
Please continue. Go on, please.
You accept all the responsibility?
The responsibility is mine, correct. Please go on.
435 volts, 450 volts.
We must continue. Go on, please.
You're going to keep giving what, 450 volts every shot now?
That's correct. Continue.
450 volts.
Milgram's discovery was disturbing. 50% of the subjects were willing to shock to the death, so long as the commands came from a seemingly legitimate source.
Yeah, they're out there having fun in the warm California sun.
So when you take the average person's willingness to take orders regardless of the outcome and add it to the formula for a corporation, you begin to have a very serious problem.
How much, if we take everything from 2 years ago as principal, how much of what you're asking for is principal and how much is interest? And the credit card companies, on average, for every dollar they were asking for in principal, they wanted $2 more in interest and fees that they said they were owed. Well, think about that.
We use 280 million gallons of gasoline a week in California. Right now the price is $2.20. Well, a year ago it was $1.20. Okay, there's $1 more a gallon. Somebody's making $280 million more a week this year. It's the same gas, the same pipelines, the same refineries. The profits are outstanding.
How do they fool us day in and day out? You need to understand, everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, there are lies being mixed in with the truth. You are being fed stories to make you believe in whatever they want you to believe.
Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Here's a team of junior spacemen with an out-of-this-world breakfast.
Comparing the marketing of yesteryear to the marketing of today is like comparing a BB gun to a smart bomb. It's much more sophisticated and it's much more pervasive. It's not that products themselves are bad or good. It's the notion of manipulating children into buying the products.
You can manipulate consumers into wanting and therefore buying your products. It's a game.
One family cannot combat an industry that spends $12 billion a year trying to get their children. They can't do it.
Corporations don't advertise products particularly. They're advertising a way of life, a way of thinking, a story of who we are as people and how we got here and what's the source of our so-called liberty and our so-called freedom. So you have decades and decades and decades of propaganda and education teaching us to think in a certain way.
They start running ads in the U.S.
With all this talk about global warming, lots of people are telling me to use less energy.
To push against the Kyoto Protocol.
But when I come home from work, I like a hot shower. Turn your air conditioner down, they say.
This is what these environmentalists want. They want to limit your freedom, your ability to use energy.
Don't drive a big car, they say. But big cars are safer. Why shouldn't my family have a big car? Turn off the lights, they say. Sure, I'll turn off the lights when I'm ready for bed, but I make sure that my mom sleeps with the light on, because if she gets up at night, I don't want her stumbling around in the dark. So why not let there be light?
Is there a global warming problem? Thousands of scientists say no.
The misconception that there's disagreement about the science has been deliberately created by a relatively small group of people. One of their internal memos leaked, and here's what it said according to the press. Their objective is to reposition global warming as theory rather than fact. This has happened before. After the Surgeon General's report. One of their memos leaked 40 years ago. Here's what they said. Doubt is our product, since it is the best means of creating a controversy in the public's mind.
Why is the American public not being clued in or educated or informed? Well, that's really an amazing, baffling mystery.
I thought I told you to kill that story. It'll cost us a lot of advertising.
He us back to the office and says, okay, we'd like you to make these changes. In fact, you will make these changes. We said, well, look, let us show you the research that we have that shows that this information you want us to broadcast isn't true. To which he replies, I don't care about that. I said, pardon me? And he said, well, that's what I have lawyers for. Just write it the way the lawyers want it written. I said, you know, this is news. This is important. This is stuff people need to know. And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat, and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is. The news is what we say it is.
Appeal court judges found that falsifying news isn't actually against the law.
We all have inside us the most powerful weapon to combat these many forms of financial, psychological, and spiritual oppression. That is the weapon of choice. We can choose to turn the TV off. We can choose to stop borrowing money for things we don't need. We can choose to not listen when they say, you can't because you're a girl, or you can't because you're black, or you can't because you're poor. We can choose the path of change. The majority of us are all good-hearted people. We truly can make anything happen. One of my favorite quotes is, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning.